What's up, guys? How's it going? Mr. Arnold coming to you for an episode of Key Turning Points in Humankind's history. And in today's event, we are going to be talking about the Glorious Revolution, also called the Revolution of 1688. And you got to keep in mind that this revolution dealt with the overthrow of King James II of England by a union of English parliamentarians alongside William III of Orange and Mary II of England. Now, the result of the revolution led to an establishment of a constitutional monarchy in which a king/queen/ruler has limited rights to rule. And in addition, the revolution also led to the documentation of the English Bill of Rights in 1689. Now, the Glorious Revolution can be traced back to the English Civil War, which occurred during the years of 1642 to 1651. The Civil War pitted the Cavaliers, who were men loyal to the king and Catholicism, versus the Roundheads, men who fought for the rights of Parliament, England's legislative governing body. The Roundheads were mostly made up of Puritans, people tied into the Protestant religion. Now, after many bloody battles and years, the high point of the Civil War occurred in 1649, when the Roundheads had captured England's absolute ruler, Charles I. The Roundheads would later try, sentence, and behead the former king. Fighting would ensue for 2 additional years, however, and we are going to see eventually the Puritans win out here, the Roundheads win out and establish what became known as Commonwealth Government. Now, the Commonwealth Government had no king in England to rule over. However, it did allow for a military dictatorship. And the person who became the military dictator was Oliver Cromwell. And he, like Charles I, gave the people of England few rights. Now, 4 years after Cromwell took over, he took over the government and ultimately dismissed Parliament. Under the military dictatorship of Cromwell, the Puritans ruled England with a certain amount of cruelty. They seem to have forgotten why they came to power in the first place. When Oliver Cromwell died in 1658, the majority of English people were happy to see him go. Oliver Cromwell's son, Richard Cromwell, took over his father's position. However, in 1659, the military forced Richard Cromwell out, and he went into exile for 20 years. Now, with Richard Cromwell out of the picture, Parliament met once again in 1659 and discussed the idea of restoring a monarch to the throne of England. The idea was known as the Restoration, and after members of Parliament voted to make this a reality, Charles I's son, Charles II, became the new king of England. Now, Charles II would rule England as an unpopular ruler, despite his best efforts to be fair. His rule lasted from 1660 to 1685, a total of 25 years, and when he died, his brother, James II, became the new King of England. Now, James II was similar to his brother, Charles II, in that he was an unpopular ruler. However, James II was not liked because he was a Catholic reigning over a large Protestant population. Now, in addition, many English Protestants were against English Catholics gaining equal social and political rights, and ultimately English Protestants were fearful of England becoming a Catholic nation. So in 1688, after the English Civil War and after the Restoration, we finally see the Glorious Revolution take place, when members of Parliament voted to force James II to give up the throne. Parliamentarian leaders invited James II's Protestant daughter Mary and her husband William III of Orange, King of Holland, to become King and Queen of England. Now, James II escaped to France, and William and Mary became the rulers of England and Scotland. And this change in power became known as the Glorious Revolution because it was bloodless. In other words, there was really no fighting going on. Now, before William and his wife Mary could be crowned, they had to agree that Parliament was the lawmaking body in England, not the ruling monarchs. They also had to agree or ask permission from Parliament to gather an army. And William and Mary had to accept this and several other acts passed by Parliament, and this eventually became known as the English Bill of Rights. In this way, some traditional powers of the monarchy were revoked or limited. And the key theme you have to understand about about this event, the Glorious Revolution, was that it was a great victory for these guys, the people that made up Parliament. Now, King William and Queen Mary would rule until 1702. And under their reign, England had a constitutional monarchy. You got to know that a constitutional monarchy means that the king and queen could no longer rule without consent from the parliament/democratic ruling body. And since some members of parliament were elected by the people, this gave the people a say in their government. Finally, parliament did two more things. First, it passed a law called the Toleration Act. The Toleration Act gave religious freedom and limited toleration to Puritans, Quakers, and other Protestants, but not to Catholics and Jews. It was an attempt to create an atmosphere of tolerance. Second, Parliament passed the Act of Settlement. This law said that Catholics could never become kings or queens of England. And the English remembered their troubles from the Catholic Stuart kings and didn't want to repeat them with the passage of this act. Now, the lasting legacy with the Glorious Revolution, what you got to keep in mind is that during the 17th and 18th century, England passed from a government with an all-powerful king, also known as an absolute autocratic monarch, to a government with a king who shared his powers with Parliament, known as a limited monarchy. Yet, England continued to expand its empire and kept its position as a very strong world power. And with that being stated, guys, that's all I have for this episode of Key Turning Points in Humankind's History. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Mr. Arnold, sign off. I'll see you guys later. Take care.